We are gathered here today to learn about developmental psychology. I know, there are much cooler things to look at right now. But if you want to pause your YouTubing of cute cat videos, then you might learn something in a few minutes. And I have to do this video for class anyway, so someone might as well watch it. And that someone, my friend, at the moment, is you. But bookmark the cat video so you don't forget it. In fact, send it to me if it's really funny. I love funny animal videos. Anywho, developmental psychology. Developmental psychologists feel that all people go through certain stages of intellectual development in the same order. Now, the chronological ages may differ depending on intelligence, but basically everyone goes through the same steps. How they go through those steps and what happens along the way is up for debate. People used to look at kids like they were fully formed adults. This was the dominant theory in the Middle Ages. This made for some really creepy art. Not only were the poor kids dressed up like adults, they were treated like adults. They worked, played, and lived alongside and just like adults. There was this weird idea back then that at the moment of conception, an itty-bitty human was shoved into the egg by the sperm, and it grew as a fully formed little being from there until it popped out as a baby to a child to an adult. However, the microscope was invented, and this theory went in the trash. Other things were invented, like the printing press and market economies, and suddenly there were all kinds of business-ish jobs like banker, merchant, journalist. Kids needed an education to do these types of jobs. This demand for education created growth of schools in the 16th and 17th century. Suddenly, kids weren't treated as little adults anymore. They were in their own category, learning about the adult world before they entered it. Now, there was this guy named John Locke. No, not the bald dude from Lost, although he was a wicked cool character, and probably named for the original John Locke, who was not bald nor in a wheelchair. Well, neither was John when he was on the island. Just watch the show. It's a great little story. Locke was the father of environmentalism and learning theory. Guys that came after him and thought he was really cool were Ivan Pavlov and B.F. Skinner. Before Locke's ideas, the main belief was that everyone had all of this information already in their brains and all they needed to do was experience life to unlock it. Locke disagreed with this, calling the mind a blank slate, and said that the stuff that enters into the mind comes from the environment. How did Locke believe this worked? Well, first you had to be stranded on a desert island, and then there was the smoke monster. Sorry, did I mention it was a good show? Anyway, many of our thoughts and feelings are created by associations. If you have a bad experience in a room, for example, you might have negative feelings every time you enter that room. Behavior also develops by repetition. By doing something over and over, it becomes a habit, and we feel more comfortable when we have performed it. We also learn by imitation. If we saw our parents do something, we are more likely to imitate that and make it a behavior of our own. Lastly, there's the rewards and punishment system. Do something good, get rewarded. Do something bad, and you get coal in your sacking. Locke believed our environment is very important in a child's early years, and all these things work together to develop a person's character. Locke advocated rewarding by praise and flattery and punishing by disapproval, stating that children are very sensitive to approval and disapproval. Locke's ideas were ahead of their time and are the foundations of many educational and developmental theories today. Locke was around in the 1600s. In the 1700s, Jean-Jacques Rousseau piped up with a different idea about development. There's several ideas about development. It's why my video isn't 30 seconds long. Rousseau was also a character on Lost, although she was a girl on the island and in real life. Rousseau was a guy, even though he wore a wig. Rousseau from Lost never brushed her hair and was always pointing a gun in people's faces. I have no idea about Rousseau's opinion on firearms. As for the record, I didn't take French. I'm only guessing on how to pronounce this guy's name from a few random YouTube videos, and all of them had funky accents, so I'll probably just revert to calling the guy Rousseau like the character from Lost. If you don't like it, make your own video. So anyway, Jean-Jacques, however you really pronounce his name, Rousseau, agreed with Locke that children were different than adults. But he didn't agree with Locke that children are blank slates. He also didn't agree with tiny human in an egg thing either. Rousseau believed that nature guides a child's growth, that we shouldn't teach children to think in the right way, we should allow the child to learn in their own way like nature intended. Rousseau designed 4 main stages of development: infancy, childhood, late childhood, and adolescence. Rousseau believed these stages unfolded according to nature's plan. His stages emerge more slowly than we would date them today, but this might reflect a historical difference. It was a few hundred years ago, after all. Wigs and all that. Rousseau had a more organic idea of education than Locke did also, suggesting that nature could continue to guide children's development along the road to independence. For example, a child should learn to walk and talk on their own. The child would never be corrected. As the child grew, they would be encouraged to learn based on their age and development according to nature's schedule. Rousseau introduced some key ideas into developmental theory: a biological timetable, a child-centered philosophy of education, a developmental schedule that is not dependent upon the child's environment. A fancy word for this is biological maturation, which sounds kind of creepy, but I promise that's not how the smoke monster was created on Lost. Actually, I'm still a little fuzzy on the smoke monster storyline on Lost, but whatever, still a good show. And there was a dog named Vincent. Dogs rule. So anyway, Rousseau's ideas have also become central to many developmental theories and psychology today. People that followed his ideas include Arnold Gesell, Maria Montessori, and Jean Piaget. Both Locke and Rousseau made radical departures from that pre-formationism tiny creature in an egg at conception idea. Rousseau was the first to establish a biological timetable, and Arnold Gesell studied this idea of biological maturation. A lot of people are familiar with Dr. Benjamin Spock's book on childcare. Spock was influenced by Gesell. Yes, there's a perfect chance to throw in a Star Trek joke here, but I beat the Lost thing to death, so I'll just plow forward. Gesell stated that a child is a product of their environment, but more importantly, they are a result of their genes. This is the classic nature versus nurture thing that gets debated at parties and in smoky bars all the time. I said there are many different theories of development. My job is to make a video about them for my class. It's everyone else's job to debate and discuss them. I'm almost done with this class, and I'm fairly tired of discussing them, so don't email me for discussions. Instead, send me the cat video you paused before watching this. Or I'll take a dog video. I'm not picky.
Zing! Hey, hello, Bobby.
Where was I? Gesell's main focus was motor behavior of a child. He was opposed to teaching children things if they weren't ready yet. His belief is that a child will sit up, walk, and talk when they're dang good and ready. He noticed things at birth, like a baby's eyes will wander around aimless, but after a few days, sometimes even hours, the baby will stop and focus on objects. No one taught them to do that. They just do it. He advocated using the baby's internal clock to determine such things as feeding schedules, that the baby would self-regulate and determine their own cycles. Gesell's philosophy was that children go through the same steps of development, but they vary in the rates of growth. John Bowlby studied human attachment. He was interested in how any young animal reacts when separated from their mother. These attachment behaviors ensured that a baby animal would be safe from harm by following, looking for, or clinging to their mother. Bowlby discovered that humans exhibit the same instinctual behavior. Bowlby also studied imprinting, which has nothing to do with the werewolf imprinting thing from Twilight. Go Team Edward. But imprinting is when a young animal forms an attachment to their mother or another animal or object at a certain period in their very young life. Bowlby suggested this kind of imprinting happens in human children also, but develops more slowly than in other animals. Babies can't crawl or follow a parent like a baby duck can, but the kid can cry and do other things to make sure the parent stays close. Ever wonder why babies do those cute, adorable things? They're tricking mom and dad to hang close so the velociraptor won't swoop in and get them. So we've talked a lot about development and threw in a smattering of educational theories in there, but let's talk about educational psychology for a moment. Because it's also what this class I'm in is about, so I should probably mention it. Even though I'd much rather chat about why I'm Team Edward instead of Team Jacob. What, a grad student can't be in love with sparkling vampires? Although Jacob does look good with his shirt off. Where was I? Educational psychology is the application of psychological principles to the field of teaching, training, and learning. So now would be a good time to talk about Maria Montessori. Montessori followed Rousseau's line of thought and believed that children learn on their own. She had the idea of sensitive periods in a child's development. No, this isn't when they're more sensitive to everything. It's a particular time in their development where the child is programmed to master certain tasks. For example, during the first 3 years, Montessori stated that a child has a desire for order. They like to put things where they belong. Between 18 months and 3 years, they have a sensitive period for using their hands. There are also sensitive periods for walking and language. Montessori created Montessori schools that are still popular today. Some schools even go up through high school. Montessori believed in giving a child a free choice. In these schools, the teacher does not try to direct or take charge of the child. The environment contains materials that the child will gravitate to on their own without supervision. Montessori did not believe in rewarding or punishing the child either way in their classwork, but they are not permitted to abuse the materials or their classmates. Jean Piaget came up with this thing called the cognitive developmental theory, and he's considered a pretty important dude for doing this. According to my textbook, this is the single most comprehensive and compelling theory of intellectual development. If it's so important, I'm not so sure why it's in chapter 6, but whatever, I didn't write the book. If I did, it might have sparkly vampires and werewolves. And believe me, neither are in this book. I checked. Piaget was hanging out in 1920 in Paris doing scientific research in psychology and studying children. He was assigned to construct an intelligence test for children. He found this job really boring. But soon there was something he found interesting: the children's wrong answers. He found a pattern in their mistakes. Piaget began to think that younger children weren't less intelligent than older ones. It was possible they just think in a different way. He abandoned standardized tests. If Piaget did it in 1920, would someone please tell me why we don't freaking do that today? He abandoned standardized tests and started interviewing children in an open-ended format. These studies and the creation of his own personal test subjects, aka he and his wife had kids, furthered his fascination into the development of children and the birth of the cognitive developmental theory. Piaget came up with stages of development. Sensory motor intelligence. This was birth to 2 when babies use physical actions to interact and deal with the world: sucking, looking, grabbing, hitting, etc. Pre-operational thought, which is 2 to 7 years, where children learn to think in symbols and images. Their thinking is illogical and intuitive. It's different from adults. Concrete operations, 7 to 11 years, children develop the capacity to think logically about things and actions that are concrete. Formal operations is 11 to adulthood. Young people can now form abstract thoughts and think on a hypothetical plane. Piaget's developmental periods are further broken down into stages, but this isn't a Piaget video, so you can do another Google search on those bad boys if you really want to dissect this thing further. Okay, how long has this video gone on so far? Oh, good grief. I can't do a paper like everyone else. I have to get all fancy and do a freaking video. There's no way I can cram in everybody that has an opinion or a theory or has sneezed in the vicinity of developmental psychology. So let's just crawl towards the finish line here, shall we? I should probably mention Freud.